Do you ever feel like every movie that comes out these days is just some kind of remake? An adaptation of a book, a comic, a video game, even another movie? Heck, even the same movie. It sort of feels like a bad emerging trend, but it isn't. Not really. When you really think about it, a lot of the most beloved movies of all time, Forrest Gump, Jaws, Psycho, The Princess Bride, Jurassic Park, Shrek, started out as something completely different. And that makes sense, right? A movie is a big investment. It helps to know the concept has already had some success elsewhere. The thing is, though, just because the book was good doesn't mean the movie will be. Adaptation is an art. And when you get it wrong, God help you. Short of becoming a politician, there are few ways to make as many people want to spill your blood as adapting their favorite fiction badly. And even if you are an extremely skilled director, and you have every asset you could possibly want, and you know the original work inside and out, and you sweat over the project for years to make sure it honors the original, sadly, the effort may have been doomed from the start. Because, as we all know, the book is always better than the movie, right? One of the best things in life is learning, which is probably why you're here to begin with. Unfortunately, not everyone learns the same. Public school is not a one-size-fits-all option, and I don't really think it ever can be. As a result, a lot of us creative types end up missing out on a lot of precious education. Fortunately, there is a shockingly easy, fun, and highly personalized way to get an education right from home. Learn all of your fundamentals, maths, sciences, computer programming, and more with our sponsor, Brilliant. Visit brilliant.org/TaleFoundry to get 30 days for free and 20% off a year subscription. Seriously, this is the most fun you'll probably ever have learning this stuff. Try it out for free and be as brilliant as I know that you can be. The first thing we have to talk about here is medium. Of course, when we say the book is better than the movie, we're not really just talking about books and movies. We're saying that the original version of a work is always better than its adaptation. And there are all kinds of adaptations. Books to podcasts, shows to movies, video games to movies or shows, novelizations, which are usually movies to books. Heck, remakes can even be considered movie adaptations of other movies. And each of those mediums has their own strengths and weaknesses that any adaptation will have to account for if it can even hope to be successful. The hard truth is that stories don't always translate neatly from one medium to the next. Think about your favorite book. If you're a visual-minded person, it's probably easy for you to imagine what it would look like on the screen. You may even have experienced reading it that way, as your own personal movie playing out in your head. Adapting a novel to film seems like it should be pretty easy. After all, it's already been written, hasn't it? Just turn it into a script and you should be golden. But it's actually a lot more complicated than that. Have you ever wondered why screenplays look like this? It's not just for fun. They're formatted this way to help the director visualize what's going to wind up on the screen. Scripts have to be unquestionably concrete. Everything that's written down should be something it's possible to see or hear, because the final product is going to be something that people see and hear. While a novel might simply state, "A dog ran by," and leave the rest to the reader's imagination, in a movie or a show, the director is going to have to decide exactly what kind of dog it is, along with where it ran and what's in the background and who else saw it, and how long the shot lasts, and on and on. And that's the easy part. Some things simply don't translate at all, even with the correct formatting. I mean, what are you even supposed to do with all the tricky book stuff like, say, internal monologues? I guess you could just turn it into a voiceover, But do that too much and it's basically just an audiobook with pictures, not exactly respecting the visual nature of the medium. One trick screenwriters sometimes use for this exact problem: have that character voice their thoughts aloud. If you've ever seen an adaptation that added a completely new character for seemingly no reason, that's often what they're doing there, giving the other, actually important character someone to bounce their thoughts off of and make the unspoken, well, spoken. Oh, and don't even get me started on exposition. In novels, or at least the good ones, the author will find some way to sprinkle details of the world throughout the text over time so that you don't even realize you're learning about it. Often, the point of view character will notice something and then quickly, naturally, connect it to other information that's already been revealed in just a line or two. Through the text, you can literally see a character's thoughts. In visual media like film or television, you don't really have that luxury, and trying to do exposition in the same way can lead to info dumps either in the form of a voiceover narration or in stilted, unnatural dialogue. As you know, our grandmother recently died, that sort of thing. No one would ever say anything like that, but that may be the only way a novice screenwriter knows how to give the audience that information. It's how you end up with moments like Geralt of Rivia reciting his backstory wistfully to his own horse. But let's say you're adapting a work and you do find a good way to handle these things. You find some approach to this untranslatable stuff that is appropriate for your medium. Great! But those changes do have a way of adding up, which can cause even the most well-executed adaptation to drift away from the feel of the original work. Bret Easton Ellis, the author of the novel American Psycho, hated the film adaptation because he thought the film's approach to Patrick Bateman's internal monologue failed to capture his role as an unreliable narrator. And yet, American Psycho is an incredibly popular, even beloved film. Why would the author hate a film about his own work if everyone else loves it? Well, that's another thing we have to talk about here. The authors. Turns out, this is not an uncommon sentiment. Back in 2006, Neil Gaiman, the author of famous works like Coraline, American Gods, and the graphic novel series The Sandman, wrote that he was worried his comics, quote, might simply become a cheap R&D lab for Hollywood. Alan Moore, who wrote V for Vendetta, Watchmen, and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, went even further. He took his name off the V for Vendetta film adaptation and even rejected his share of the profits made from it. He seemed skeptical that his work could ever succeed as anything other than a graphic novel. Quote, there are things that we did in Watchmen that could only work in a comic, and were indeed designed to show off things that other media can't. You would expect, then, that when an author adapts their own work, these problems become a lot easier to avoid. But that's not necessarily the case either. Stephen King despised what director Stanley Kubrick did with the adaptation of his novel The Shining, widely considered to be one of the best horror films of all time. The movie has no heart, he said. There's no center to the picture. In fact, he hated it so much that he eventually resolved to just try directing an adaptation himself. You'll notice the same obvious conclusion we came to. The result, a film called Maximum Overdrive, was a critical and commercial failure, and King swore never to direct again. Turns out, being a good novelist doesn't guarantee you'll be a good director, or even a good screenwriter. Which makes me wonder, is accuracy really that important? Is adaptation really about getting the details right? The Roald Dahl novel Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has not one, but two film adaptations. One released in 1971 starring Gene Wilder, and one released in 2005 starring Johnny Depp. The 1971 version deviates from the book significantly, and Roald Dahl, unsurprisingly, was not a fan. He completely disowned the film when it came out, even though he wrote the screenplay for it. Dahl, perhaps thankfully for him, didn't live to see the 2005 version, but that one is much more accurate to the book, excepting Willy Wonka's weird, orthodontia-related backstory, of course. And, despite all the quote-unquote improvements to the story's accuracy, that one has basically since become a meme, for the Gene Wilder one is still a classic. After all, Who can resist the magic of pure imagination or the silliness of the Oompa Loompa songs? No one. That's who. That's because the most significant difference between the two versions isn't in their details, it's in their tone. Tone is one of the most important things to capture in adaptations if you want the works to feel the same, but it's also, so often, the first thing lost in the pursuit of accuracy. Which brings me to what I'm going to say candidly is probably the worst adaptation of all time. I know, you were probably hoping we wouldn't talk about it. Believe me, this is going to be as painful for me as it is for you. You may not even want to acknowledge it exists, but it's impossible to discuss adaptations without bringing up The Last Airbender. If you're lucky enough to somehow not know about this, The Last Airbender is M. Night Shyamalan's live-action film adaptation of the animated Nickelodeon show Avatar: The Last Airbender. The show is a masterpiece. The movie is, how shall I say this, quite bad. In fact, it's one of the top contenders for the worst films ever made. The original show has a score of 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. The movie? 5. Technically, it can't really be true that this is one of the worst movies ever when movies like The Room exist, but it's okay for The Room to be bad. It's not okay for a AAA big-budget adaptation of a beloved work like Avatar. That isn't just a failure. To fans of the original series, it feels like a personal violation. When he started adapting the show, Shyamalan said, "I took away a little bit of the slapsticky stuff that was in there for the little kids. We grounded Kitara's brother, who was the comic relief in the show." It's a bad enough sign that he just called Sokka, one of the main characters in the show, Kitara's brother, but when Shyamalan said he took away the slapsticky stuff, what he actually meant was he took away the heart of the story. The lightheartedness and fun that made the original work so beloved is nowhere to be seen in the movie. All the colorful characters have been crushed down into bland variations of the same grim, joyless soldier archetype. A lot of Shyamalan's bad adaptive choices were made in the spirit of misguided accuracy. He changed the way that bending, the elemental magic system, worked in order to make it more realistic, turning spirited fight scenes of air and earth into painfully tedious affairs where a whole team of earthbenders have to stomp in sync for 30 seconds to make a single boulder float by. He changed the way firebending worked so that instead of conjuring fire from thin air, benders are limited to manipulating bonfires and candle flames. And he seemed determined to include every single plot point from the show in order to make it as accurate as possible, which meant reducing whole subplots to voiceover narration instead of cutting or reworking them to suit the medium he was actually working with. A single feature-length film. The first season of Avatar alone is about 8 hours long. The movie is about 90 minutes. 10 years after the show ended, Netflix announced that they were going to try their own live-action version of it. This one, a series. As I'm writing this, it hasn't come out yet, but it should have by the time you watch this video. The series will almost certainly be better than the movie. It has to be. It might even be good. But I have to wonder, is it necessary? Does making a live-action version of a near-perfect show actually add to it? Do we really care if Disney painstakingly remakes all their classic animated films beat by beat, the exact same movie, but with actors and CG instead of cartoons? It's sort of the same question we started with. Is there even a point to translating a work into a different medium? Is the movie ever actually better than the book? Have you ever seen the movie How to Train Your Dragon? It's a good one. The books it came from, however, well, they're different. Before it was a movie, How to Train Your Dragon was a series of middle-grade novels by Cressida Cowell. The first book follows Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, a nerdy Viking boy struggling to impress his father, the chief of the Hairy Hooligan tribe. The cultural custom in this world is for young boys to catch a dragon and train it, which involves lots of yelling and general meanness. If you fail, you're sent off to live in exile. The animated DreamWorks adaptation fleshes out the characters and refines the message while keeping the silly tone and mildly gross humor from the books. Notice that. The tone is still intact. and yet the plot is different enough to be almost unrecognizable. In the movie, Toothless is a fearsome black dragon with retractable fangs, not a tiny wimpy green one with no teeth. In the movie, dragons can't talk the way they do in the books. Hiccup trains dragons the way you might tame a horse, rather than bribing them in dragonese. And most importantly of all, the dragons don't start out as part of Viking society in the movies the way they do in the books. In the movie, that's a change Hiccup causes by learning how to relate to dragons as a species, and in doing so, he transforms his little village into a better and more peaceful place. That's not to say the original How to Train Your Dragon is a bad book or anything. It's a great book. It's just, as I said, different. A book aimed at 8 to 11-year-olds. The movie version expands upon it in a way that appeals to a broader, more mature audience. A movie that adults and children can enjoy together. Fun for the whole family, as they say. I think Adaptation gets a bad rap. The book is always better than the movie. That's how we started this video. And you stuck around, didn't you? Still, I don't think that most people actually believe that adaptation itself is a bad thing. I think it's just that a lot of adaptations are created for bad reasons. Just translating a work from one medium to another because you can, because maybe one gets more visibility, has more prestige, or presents an interesting challenge for you. When the reasons for adaptation are so cynical, can we really be surprised when the end result feels that way too? I think so many adaptations turn out badly because, in the end, people just forget that they're making art. And adaptation is art. It just looks a little different. It's the art of understanding mediums and their strengths and differences. It's the art of finding what creates tone and respecting that without also becoming a slave to accuracy. It's the art of giving people a new and different way to engage with the stories they love. And in some cases, if you treat the story just right, allowing them to discover that love. I will say, we sort of make learning a medium sound like a trivial thing in this video. Of course, it isn't. Not all art is something you can just pick up a brush or a piece of editing software and figure out. Some art takes years of education and training just to understand the nuts and bolts. If you don't know basic math and reasoning skills, good luck adapting your story into a video game. Unfortunately, it's pretty easy to feel left behind where education is concerned. Public school isn't really a one-size-fits-all solution, and seeking your own education is increasingly reserved for people with enough money to pay for it. But it doesn't have to be that way. Our sponsor, Brilliant.org, can make all of that far more affordable and far more fun than it's ever been before. Brilliant really has been helping me broaden my horizons. I can always go to the site, click into a class, pick up where I left off, and take in a bite-sized piece of the fundamentals I've been missing. Whether it's maths, science, physics, anything and everything STEM, Brilliant has something for you. Lately for me, it was Brilliant's Thinking in Code class, which I feel is oddly appropriate for me. I can really feel it just opening up a whole new world to me that I had almost no idea was there before. Slowly but surely, as I educate myself in this way, the AI revolution isn't looking quite so intimidating anymore. And to be perfectly honest, it doesn't even really feel like studying. A lot of what you do on Brilliant might be better classified as minigames. Look how interactive and fun these are. This one even has robots. Because Brilliant is so simple, moves at your pace, and starts at the very fundamentals, this is actually something that's really sticking for me. Almost like a personal tutor or coach. A legitimate, accessible, affordable, easy education, even for someone like me, with my head in the clouds and my face ever buried in fiction. And the best part? You can start for free. Visit brilliant.org/TaleFoundry or click the link in the description to get your first 30 days for free. The first 200 Tale Foundry fans to sign up for a yearly subscription to Brilliant will get 20% off, so definitely hurry. Those slots are going to fill up fast. Again, visit brilliant.org/TaleFoundry to get your first 30 days for free and 20% off a year subscription. Don't let something as simple as a lack of education hold you back. Try this out for free and be as brilliant as I know that you can be. Anyway, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next week. Bye!